Hours after a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran was painstakingly negotiated, a glimmer of hope emerged on the horizon. The world held its breath, cautiously optimistic that a period of calm might finally prevail. But that hope was tragically short-lived. Before the ink could even dry on the agreement, Gaza's skies erupted in violence once more, shattering the fragile peace. The world, or at least its leaders, had celebrated a diplomatic breakthrough, hailing it as a victory for diplomacy and a step towards stability in the region. But for Gazans, weary from years of conflict and hardship, hope was fleeting. A fragile butterfly crushed under the weight of renewed hostilities. Israeli airstrikes returned almost immediately, a swift and brutal reminder that the underlying tensions remained unresolved. The renewed attacks were shattering any illusion, any lingering belief that peace was at hand, that a lasting resolution was within reach for everyone caught in the crossfire. While global attention, as it often does, quickly shifted to the high-stakes truce and the political maneuvering surrounding it, Gaza's suffering continued, largely ignored and tragically unresolved, a persistent wound festering in the heart of the Middle East. The brief optimism, the fleeting moment of respite, was quickly replaced by explosions and the piercing wail of sirens, a cruel and constant reminder that their conflict exists on a different timeline, one measured not in days or weeks, but in generations of pain and loss. For Palestinians, the message was painfully clear. Their pain, their suffering, their very lives were secondary, mere pawns in the region's complex and often ruthless power games. The celebrated ceasefire, the supposed triumph of diplomacy, felt like a bitter illusion, a cruel joke played on a population desperate for peace. It offered no real respite from the relentless violence, no tangible hope for a better future, only a brief pause before the storm resumed. For families mourning their dead, burying their loved ones amidst the rubble and despair, the promise of peace, the talk of ceasefires, was nothing but a cruel mirage shimmering on the horizon, a false hope that only deepened their pain. The Israel-Iran ceasefire, a fragile agreement in a region known for its volatility, announced with cautious optimism on June 24, 2025, brought an end to a deadly 12-day conflict, a period marked by intense aerial bombardments and escalating tensions that threatened to engulf the entire region in a wider, more devastating war. Brokered painstakingly by the United States, after weeks of shuttle diplomacy, the deal managed to halt direct hostilities, preventing further loss of life and destruction. It was hailed, at least initially, as a significant diplomatic triumph, a testament to the power of negotiation. Hope soared, fueled by the prospect of lasting peace, that this fragile truce might open the door to resolving other deeply entrenched crises, especially the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Many optimistically believed that if sworn enemies could find a way to pause their seemingly endless war, perhaps Gaza's long-standing agony, marked by blockade and conflict, could finally come to an end too. But for the people of Gaza, the ceasefire felt like just another distant headline, offering little tangible relief. Residents watched with a mixture of hope and skepticism, desperately wishing that the promise of peace would somehow reach them, but their daily nightmare of poverty, restricted movement, and constant fear sadly continued unabated. The initial wave of optimism was, unfortunately, short-lived, as Gaza's persistent suffering and the urgent need for a lasting solution remained conspicuously absent from the agenda. On June 25, just a day after the ceasefire, Israeli strikes pounded Gaza, killing dozens. The attacks targeted neighborhoods already devastated by months of war, forcing families to flee yet again. Medics scrambled through rubble, searching for survivors as despair set in. The brief hope sparked by the regional truce was crushed by renewed bloodshed. Gazans felt abandoned, their suffering overshadowed by the larger geopolitical drama. "The whole universe has let us down," one resident said, echoing a widespread sense of betrayal. The trauma deepened and hope faded once more. The world reacted swiftly to the renewed violence in Gaza, exposing deep divisions. Israel defended its actions as necessary to defeat Hamas, insisting the Iran ceasefire was unrelated. Palestinian leaders condemned the strikes as a massacre, demanding international intervention. The United Nations and European Union called for restraint and protection of civilians. Even the US, fresh from brokering the truce, warned Israel against further escalation. Human rights groups labeled the strikes indiscriminate, calling for accountability. The cycle of justification and condemnation spun on, while Gazans paid the price. Once again, global politics overshadowed the human cost. In the wake of recent diplomatic maneuvers, a critical question arises. Why didn't the Israel-Iran ceasefire, a deal aimed at de-escalation, include Gaza? What factors were at play that led to this exclusion? The answer, as is often the case in this region, lies in the complex and fractured political landscape. The Middle East is a mosaic of competing interests and long-standing rivalries. The Truce, fundamentally, was a state-to-state deal, a formal agreement between recognized national entities. It was primarily designed to prevent a broader regional war, a catastrophic escalation, and not specifically to address the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Israel, for its part, treats the situation in Gaza as a separate conflict, primarily against Hamas militants, viewing it as a conflict with a non-state entity, rather than a sovereign state with which it can negotiate on equal footing. The cessation of hostilities with Iran allowed Israel to strategically refocus its military resources and attention on its ongoing campaign in Gaza. Furthermore, Iran's interests and strategic objectives don't always perfectly align with those of its regional proxies, effectively leaving Gaza isolated and without a powerful advocate at the negotiating table. Ultimately, the ceasefire was a calculated move that prioritized the protection of national interests and strategic objectives, perhaps at the expense of addressing the immediate and dire needs and protecting the lives of civilians trapped in the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Without a seat at the table and lacking direct representation in these critical negotiations, the Gazan people were effectively left powerless to influence the decisions that directly impact their lives. Their fate, it seems, continues to be decided by distant powers operating with their own complex agendas, and so their suffering was tragically sidelined in the pursuit of a broader, perhaps more elusive, regional stability. Lasting peace in the Middle East remains elusive, as recent events painfully show. The region's conflicts are deeply intertwined, yet solutions remain fragmented. Global and regional powers fuel the cycle of violence, while internal divisions paralyze progress. The US and Iran back their allies, complicating any hope for a comprehensive settlement. Meanwhile, civilians, especially in Gaza, endure unimaginable hardship. The world's failure to resolve these crises perpetuates despair. True peace demands justice, security, and recognition of everyone's humanity.